Next Steps Forward is committed to helping others achieve more than ever while experiencing greater personal empowerment and well-being. And our guests today embody all those qualities. Brothers James and Patrick Dowdell grew up as the sons of a New York City firefighter and a public school teacher who instilled service and leadership as the core of their life missions. Following the tragic loss of their father, FDNY Lieutenant Kevin Dowdell, on September 11, 2001, Patrick and James joined the rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero. The following year, Patrick was accepted into the United States Military Academy at West Point. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant when he graduated in 2006 and served a one-year deployment as a platoon leader in Iraq beginning in 2008 during combat operations in Baghdad. Promoted to captain, he deployed to Afghanistan in 2010, overseeing mission planning and combat operations in Faro province. James Dowdell was a 17-year-old high school senior when he participated in the search and recovery efforts at the World Trade Center site. He began his formal FDNY career on Ladder 174 in Brooklyn. James was promoted to the rank of lieutenant in January on what would have been his father's 70th birthday. James Dowdell is also a sought-after public speaker who draws upon the invaluable lessons he learned from his father's legacy to inspire audiences with insights into service, resilience, and the enduring impact of family and duty. James and Patrick Dowdell, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And it's an honor to meet you both. I've been looking for this conversation for a while, so appreciate your time here. Gentlemen, we're all shaped by our parents, whether they're present or absent, but your lives have been so indelibly influenced by your parents that I can't imagine starting our conversation anywhere else but there. Patrick, you were a freshman at Iona College, but applied to West Point. You were home the weekend before 9/11. Take us through those last few days with your dad.
Sure. So we're, very, very close family and, grew up in a tight-knit community here in New York. I had applied to West Point in 2001 and was waitlisted. So I didn't get in. Subsequently applied to Iona and was accepted. So I was in my freshman year, had just moved in. My parents, dropped me off and, you're all the freshman year kind of jitters, but also some excitement. Iona's only about an hour and a half from where we grew up. So not super far away. So James's birthday is actually September 10th, which was Monday of that year. So came home that weekend really to, kind of do a little birthday party for him, have dinner, was learning how to do my own laundry and all that good stuff. So home cooked meal. So I was only up there for, a couple weeks and came home. We had a nice normal weekend. I was actually beginning my reapplication process. My dad was very disciplined in did you keep track of all the things you needed to do? Did you send this letter in? Where are we at? He had me write it all in a notebook. It's kind of how he structured his organizational skills. And I was going through that with him that weekend. Here's the things I got to do to kind of reapply. And he dropped me off that Sunday after dinner. And it was a normal goodbye. Like, I'll see you soon. I'll talk to you. He was going to work that Monday, working at 24. So worked Monday into Tuesday, which was the 11th. So obviously was working that morning. It was a nice normal, love you, see you soon, and dropped me off and off I went. So, nothing unusual, right? We didn't really know what was coming in those next 24 hours.
And what motivated you to want to attend West Point and pursue a military career?
Well, we used to go up to West Point. So I'm a bagpiper and James is a drummer, and we've been doing it since we were kids. We grew up in a kind of an Irish American neighborhood here in New York. So my dad was into Irish music and the culture. My mom's of Italian heritage. Thankfully, she was the cook in the family. So from a young age, we were exposed to, Irish music and things like that. There's a local pipe band that was given lessons. So went and signed up and started to learn and always took to it. We used to go to West Point every summer for the military tattoo, they called it, which a whole bunch of pipe bands get together and we'd play on Trophy Point. I remember being up there and seeing cadets walking around and thinking it was pretty cool. I was a G.I. Joe guy and, played Army and stuff. And it was like I got exposed to it and said, maybe you give this a shot. My dad thought it was cool. And I was like, you should give it a go and maybe apply when you get out of high school. So I did, and never thought I would even, that I would be in the running or get accepted. But when I got close, it was like, hey, maybe you should give this another shot. You were right there.
And we're going to talk about both your musical prowess later in the show, so I appreciate you giving us a little sneak preview into that. James, you've said that your dad would always tell you guys that he'd responded to a ton of fires and emergencies. He'd always found the time to say, you might see this, but I'm okay. When your mom told you that she still hadn't heard from your dad on September 12th, you knew it wasn't a good sign. How long did it take for each of you to process that he was gone?
Yeah, it was back in '01, right? We didn't have the communication devices we had today, right? The cell phones, we didn't have that instant communication. So, when we were leaving the city, even when we were getting, I had to get on the ferry and go to Staten Island with a family friend, because really the only way out of Lower Manhattan that day was by boat. And so we get to, when I get to our friend's house, I called my mother, and she was just getting home at the time. She said, she hadn't talked to my father, but it was still kind of earlier in the day, and we were trying to everyone was in such shock, right? That day, there was no real understanding. You couldn't comprehend what was really going on. So when we spoke to mom the next day, we couldn't get home that night because all the bridges were closed. So we ended up getting back to the house on Wednesday morning. And when I called her, I said, "Hey, have you talked to Dad?" She said, "No, but I'll see you when you get here." So it was about an hour car ride, and when we walked in, she just said, we were waiting for Pat to come home from Iona, and she said she pretty much broke the news, like, we haven't heard from him. And for us, really, that was probably one of the hardest things about 9/11 was that there was no information for a long time, and so every time the door swung open, we were trying to, like, we would all turn our heads and hope to see Dad kind of walking through. And then as days, hours turned into days turned into weeks. Like, I'd say, like, there was no aha moment where we instantly knew. Like, we just kind of faded, hope just kind of faded away till we realized that there was no way.
We thought that there was reports that there could be a void under the rubble, or an evacuation had taken place and they could be in a hospital in New Jersey for all we knew. Like, so we were just kind of, like you said, holding on to the hope that maybe something had gone on. And like you said, after a couple days, it became much more apparent, just the scale and how many people were reported as missing, that the worst had probably happened.
James, your story is very important for all of us to hear. I know you two are close brothers. Can you move a little bit closer to the mic into Patrick? Appreciate it. Thank you. So you two were at ground zero, sifting through the pile, as it was called, in the days and weeks while fires were still burning, and for a couple of months after, as toxic chemicals were still heavy in the air. Many people would refuse to do that, and especially knowing a loved one was buried in the rubble. How are you able to do it, both from a permission standpoint of civilians and an emotional one?
Well, luckily we were surrounded by incredible people over at Rescue 4, right, where my father was working and assigned. So those guys kind of set a precedence early on. They had a great presence at the World Trade Center. They were there. There was at least 2 to 4 guys every 24 hours from Rescue 4 there. So they always had a representative kind of answer any questions for our family and kind of keep us updated and try to quell the rumor mill, which was kind of running rampant at that time. So there was such chaos down there, and we didn't get, I think it was early October when we really first started, like, working down there. Things had settled a little bit, right? The dust had settled. And it wasn't until Patrick was at Iona and kind of the environment around him was a freshman college environment. And Pat kind of, remember him calling saying, like, everyone's in a different mindset than I have right now. Like, we still don't know where Dad is. And then it was Pat who said, I think we should try to go down there. And we called the guys in Rescue 4 who were more than willing. And so they kind of took us down there and took us under their wing.
Yeah, they did have a meeting in the firehouse beforehand. Like, is this a good idea? And because we were young, right? 17 and 18 years old. what came out of that meeting was, what would you want to do if it was your dad? And they said, I'd want to be there too. And that made the decision pretty easy. So we were instantly welcomed into that, environment. And honestly, we didn't feel like there was anywhere else we wanted to be. We were going to be the ones to carry him out if we found it. We would have been at the head of the Stokes basket with carrying him out of there. So that was the intent from the very beginning.
As we talk about your dad, would each of you share some of your favorite memories of him?
Sure. Well, a couple things come to mind. First off, my dad was from a pretty big Irish family in Brooklyn, and had a lot of life experience very early in his life as well, and that definitely brushed off on us. We were very family centric. We did everything together as a family, but he definitely encouraged us to get outside of our comfort zone. So one of the things that comes to mind is we would go down to the beach down here. He liked to surf. And we would go down even sometimes in some pretty rough waters at the end of the day when he got home from the firehouse. We would go down and, go boogie board and go surfing, and kind of go out there by ourselves and sometimes even in a hurricane type weather, go for a swim. And I always remember that as being something that I was a little unsure, but knowing that he was there, you kind of get over that fear and you go out there. So we would do that a lot. As kids, it's something we now do with our kids, which is pretty cool.
The other thing I often think about was he was a fireman, but he also had his own hardwood flooring company. So he was always working. He was always, he was on his hands and knees, working on the side all day. And part of the biggest things he worked for, as he always said, was a family dinner. So he would tell us to make sure we go upstairs and dress like he had two jobs, come down, and he'd take us to a restaurant. He loved going to different places in Greenwich Village, Lower Manhattan. He always liked to get us out, get us walking around as a family in the city. So whenever we'd sit down at a restaurant, he would just sit there, he'd take a deep breath, and he'd say, "This is what I worked all week for." And I think as we've gotten older, we've kind of recognized how proud he must have been at those times to be sitting there with us.
Love those stories. Thank you for sharing. So you two met President George W. Bush. Did that happen at Ground Zero when he was there, or did that take place much later?
That took place later. He was the commencement speaker at my graduation from West Point. So leading up to graduation, when because it was against the odds that I was actually going to walk across the stage. By the time that came around and it was really close, we got a call, and I had never been called from the White House before, so it's a real ominous, weird number that pops up, and so and so, we want to arrange for you to meet the president after the graduation ceremony. So again, pretty surreal to just be there, graduating to begin with. And then basically it had been set up that he was going to mention me in the commencement speech, which was also, very, very cool. So you throw your hat in the air, and before my hat, I think, even hit the ground, I was being kind of escorted away with from the Secret Service to go and they grabbed my mom and my brother, and we got to go, in the back and have a quick moment with him, which was definitely very cool. Yeah.
And James, sorry, go ahead, please.
Right after that, so what Pat's talking is was about April of 2006, and it was great because I just got on the New York City Fire Department, and I got on in January and graduated. Probe school was in the fields around April also, which was so I was like a brand new probie on the FDNY. Pat was graduating West Point, and it was right before the 5-year anniversary, because when President Bush a couple months later did a State of the Union on September 11th, we were very fortunate. He had mentioned our family in that State of the Union address, and that was kind of a surreal moment that he gave us. Remembered our father and our family after on the 5-year mark.
And is the photo you two shared with me for the 9/11 Legacy Stories wall the one from your graduation?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
That is one of my favorite photos. And for our listeners, it's 911legacy.org. We'll talk about that later on. Um, James, you talked about just becoming a probie. What inspired you to join the FDNY? Was it always your plan, or did 9/11 change that?
No, that was always the plan for me. I just remember kind of going into work with my father. All of his friends were fine, and everyone who built that house was a fine. And I remember looking up to these guys, and he always worked in the best firehouses on the job, and kind of meeting that caliber of person. Right, these guys were superhuman to me. You'd see them walk into a room full of smoke. They'd come out and they'd have a smile on their face, and they'd get back in the rig. And then we'd go back to quarters, and they'd be breaking each other's chops, and there was just that sense of community there that I know my father really enjoyed, like hanging out with the guys and laughing and the excitement. And so from a very young age, there's been nothing really else in my vision but this.
Are there moments in the job when you feel especially connected to your dad, or think about what would he do in certain situations?
Yeah, I mean, there was a million, especially like right getting on thinking about, I remember driving home from my first fire. Um, you're in the car on Utica Avenue, and you just, it would have been really cool to call him and talk to him. So I remember thinking about things like that, and then going on to work in Rescue 2, which was where my father did, a bunch of times. So to walk into that firehouse, and what was really cool was right on 9/11, I brought, my family came to Rescue 2 after we went to Rescue 4, and to see my kids sitting around the kitchen table that Pat and I sat around at when we were kids, it was a full circle moment. I felt like my father would have been he would have been pretty happy at that moment.
He's smiling right now. So we've been talking about your dad, but your mom has had an equal impact on your lives. Where did your mom find the strength and resilience to hold herself and your family together after losing your father?
Yeah, so in a similar way, my mom also comes from a somewhat of a big family, and her and my dad were very much, a unit, right? They were very much in sync, and were always, again, very close. So, but at the time, having, especially 2006, right? The war is kind of in full swing. She had already lost a husband in the line of duty. She's got her youngest son joining the exact same department, and she had her other son going off to what was definitely going to be pretty much going off to war. I think she felt both pride. I mean, we've talked about it, where she felt very much, a lot of pride in the decisions that we had made to go back into that, I guess that sense of duty that we had, to kind of follow in my father's footsteps and that, but at the same time was obviously very nervous, that, something bad could happen. But I think she said she trusted our ability to make good decisions, and our upbringing had kind of prepared us for a lot of what was to come. I look at that time where we were working at the site and being surrounded by those types of people. We did kind of come out of it grown up. Despite being somewhat young, we had done a lot of the work to be prepared for what might come. So, I think we got pretty mature pretty quick, being exposed to those things, and then you just got to go out there and hope for the best sometimes. But she was always our biggest supporters and cheerleaders throughout that whole time as well. So, luckily, we were able to persevere through some tough times, and now she gets to where we all live pretty close by, so we see each other a lot, and she's with the grandkids and all that, and very, very lucky to have that close relationship still.
And if either of you could say one thing to her about the impact she's had in your lives, what would it be?
I think probably the best thing, well, the biggest impact I would say is just how she's always put family first. She's never faltered from that. She, like, from a very young age, she told us the most important thing is that you two stay close. Like, that's always been the lesson. And so her foresight to making sure that this family stays as strong. I think we always say that's part of my dad's biggest legacy is that him and my mom, like, we're closer now than we've ever been. And I think that so for both my mother and my father, that's kind of, I think, the legacy of us, of our family, is that we are truly best friends.
She pushed us into that, right after, especially after 9/11, when we knew my dad was gone. She said, look, this happened, but you guys got to get back out there. Like, we're not going to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves. We have responsibilities. You're going back to school. You're going to focus on the things that that you have to focus on. And it gave us a kick in the butt, to get back out there and keep going forward.
James, I mentioned how you just promoted to lieutenant back in January, but prior to that, you served in Special Operations Command at your father's former Firehouse Rescue 2. Describe that job to us, please.
Yeah, really just a dream come true. Again, just this, that was a firehouse we spent time with as we were kids. It was so just to kind of walk in there, I remember dropping my gear on the floor the first day and just the type of people I was surrounded by my entire career, especially at Rescue 2. It set a standard that it was just it's an incredible place to be a part of. It's definitely one of the busiest firehouses, if it's the busiest firehouse on the FDNY, and the fact that to be part of that history was just, like I said, a dream come true to be there.
Yeah, I'll brag for James. There's only one rescue company in each borough, so there's only 5 rescue companies total on the FDNY. So the Brooklyn, Rescue 2 is for Brooklyn. So any major emergency that happens in the entire borough of Brooklyn, which is massive, Rescue 2 would pretty much go to those emergencies. Anything from something in the water where they have to scuba dive, high angle rescue, a collapse, someone stuck under a train, someone, in a bad situation, and especially at a fire where even other firemen might be at danger. That's where they typically send the rescue companies in for those things. So it comes with a definite level of prestige that I think is pretty cool. That my dad had that, was in Rescue 2 for many years, and then was killed when he was in Rescue 4, which is the Queen's rescue company. And to have that lineage is pretty cool to see James wearing the same patch.
Big brother doting on you there, James.
Yeah.
Don't get too used to it.
Well, and for our listeners outside the tri-state area, Brooklyn is a huge borough. And the reason I know that, besides going there, is a handful of years ago, my wife ran the New York City Marathon. And the one thing she says to this day is she had no idea how big Brooklyn is. She's like, I ran in Brooklyn forever.
First half.
So we talked about your time at Ground Zero, helping to clear debris and recover victims. Since then, there's been a measurable increase in rare cancers among first responders. About 1,500 people in the federal program that provides medical monitoring and treatment have died, of 9/11 related airway and digestive disorders, and nearly 1,400 have died from related cancers. Have either of you undergone any medical checkups to monitor for potential health issues related to your exposure at Ground Zero?
You have to go from the job, right?
I just go to an annual medical with the FDNY, but that would be the extent of it. Really, I mean, we're seeing people, first responders get sick and injured. I mean, and it's definitely something that we're starting to see more and more, right? Like they think they surpassed the number of New York City firemen that were killed after September 11th and before. So it's definitely something. Like all these guys, that they were volunteering essentially. They were down there looking for our father and all the other firemen and civilians and police down there. So I think it's only necessary for them to have the access to make sure that they are checking up on it.
Yeah, it's top of mind now, right? I think it's become much more of it's not as taboo to go for those checkups. We're guys. We try to avoid going to the doctor, I guess. And I think having seen a lot of young, seemingly healthy, fit guys get really seriously sick is a wake up call. So I would say, yeah, we're we're much more aware now than I think we were in the past about, keeping an eye on that thing and going in for the checkups and, making sure that, we're not kicking it down the road too far. And so, yeah, I think most guys are on board with that now, thankfully.
And James, I'm not sure if you can comment on this question given your current role, and if you can't, that's fine. We'll move on. But I recently learned about some pretty significant, I'll call it issues, with the Victims Compensation Fund. And I know that they need about $2 billion to fully fund it in perpetuity. I heard about one firefighter who perished, has left 6 children and his wife. That family has only received $800 to date. The law firms are making literally billions of dollars. Again, I don't know if you can comment. If not, that's fine. But, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, are you hearing or seeing anything from some of your firefighters?
To be honest with you, Chris, I'm not hearing anything. I'm not super educated enough to speak on the Victims Compensation Fund. I just know that, the FDNY and really the country has an obligation to make sure that our guys are safe and to do as much as they can. And I know the FDNY and the union have been pushing for that for years, and we hope that the 9/11 funding will stay and we'll kind of see it through like everyone, right? It's not just a bumper sticker and never forget. So we hope that everyone actually, remembers the sacrifices.
Well, you and I have only, the three of us only know each other for a few months now, but I'm a little tenacious when I get my teeth into something. And this was just brought to my attention last week. And so we'll get some traction on this. You know that.
Yep.
And there's been some amazing foundations too that have sprung up, in a similar way to the military, right? Where nonprofits and things like that have stepped up to try to, assist in that way as well. And there's some really great ones out there that are doing some phenomenal work. The Tunnel to Towers and some others, the Widows and Children's Fund. There's some really great organizations out there doing good things for those that are not just from 9/11 even, right? There's still a lot of emergencies and guys get hurt and even killed. And, even recently at a James's firehouse, a fireman was killed. So it's good to see that there's some organizations out there trying to do some of that work as well.
Completely agree with you. And I know those are great organizations. My whole point and my beef is to not get too political, is that the government needs to take care of you.
Yep.
You as a veteran, you as a first responder, full stop. And it shouldn't take after-tax dollars for charity contribution to do it. It should be the government's responsibility. I'm not for bigger government, but this is one thing that they owe you guys. And so again, I'm on it.
Yeah. And if you Google 9/11 justice, it's a great cause that's kind of trying to help out this, what we're talking about, and kind of make sure that Congress and the government help get on board with this.
All right, we'll move past the VCF and focus on you guys a little bit more here. Get out of the politics weeds. Patrick, you said before that the amazing thing is, even knowing the dangers, the men and women who were there on the pile still would have been there. Would you elaborate on that and what it says about service to others and the bonds of brotherhood?
Yeah, the thing about what happened that day is that, those guys showed up looking up at that building and knowing that it was not good. But if there was people in there, they were going to go. And I truly believe that even knowing, hey, there's a risk of collapse or a major risk at, that you might not come out. If there was an opportunity to go save people, they're going to go. And I think that's the difference between maybe even a civilian and somebody who chooses this line of work, is that they know the challenges, they know the danger, and they choose to do it anyway. And there is a sense of something greater than themselves when they do that. And I think it speaks to the type of caliber of people that choose that line of work. I don't think it just stops at firemen. I think it extends to police folks and nurses and teachers and, civil servants that go out and try to do good in their own way. But yeah, I think that day in particular, I truly believe those guys were going to go in. If there was any way they could help even one person, they were going.
And something else that speaks to those bonds of brotherhood were the funerals of the firefighters who lost their lives. Some firefighters had 2 funerals, Explain why that happened, and again, the message it sent when firefighters who didn't even know them were at every one of those funerals.
Yeah, the right after the 11th, when nobody knew what was going on, so people kind of had memorial services right away, and because it was such an emotional time, right? Everyone from your neighborhood, everyone kind of there was such a sense of community around us as family members who lost someone, but the community around people would kind of embrace that, and they would have a memorial service, and then a couple months later, or if they ended up recovering that person from the World Trade Center, they would have another actual full blown funeral with the body and the procession. So for in the beginning, there was definitely a duplicate of the memorial services, and then into the funerals, and just that was firemen from around the world came to those funerals and stood there and supported. And historically, the fire department funerals, when a fireman gets killed in the line of duty, right, there's tens of thousands that turn out for it. And that was on September 12th when 343 guys didn't come home. That was a huge task, and really, people, like I said, the people who showed up to that were September 12th brought out the best in people, right? And people would turn out to those things just to stand there for those families, and it was definitely an emotional time.
All right, this has been a heavy conversation so far. Let's lighten it up a little bit here. Volunteering on Ground Zero wasn't the only way you served. You both played in the FDNY Emerald Society pipes and drums at funerals as young men. How'd that come about?
Well, as we said, we were already involved with the bagpipes in a separate pipe band, right? Just doing a lot of times just parades, and we're in March right now, and it's parade season. There's parades, St. Patrick's Day parades all over the city, and we travel all over the place to play in them. But the fire department pipe band has been around for since the 60s, right? So over 50 years. And they were formed basically to honor firemen who were lost in the line of duty, and it's become part of the tradition of a FDNY funeral at least. So we've been playing with them since 9/11 because they needed to fill the ranks. Really, there was some days where there'd be 10 plus funerals in one day, and they wanted to make sure there was representation from the pipe band at every single one of them. So we would divide and conquer, and we were going to be at those funerals anyway, right? We were going to them as people who were affected by it and cared enough to show up and honor them. But then to be able to do it as part of the pipe band was even more special. So again, similar thing, right? The brotherhood of the fire department, we have a similar brotherhood with the pipe band, and we make sure that we send them off in the right way. And I think that's part of the big tradition of the FDNY pipes and drums. And unfortunately, we've become pretty good at it because we've had to do it a lot of times. But there was, just hundreds and hundreds of funerals and memorial services over the course of only about 8 months. So we represented basically every single one of them had pipers at it. So we've been playing with them ever since, and a lot of good stuff. They're not all funerals. We do have a lot of fun gigs, with the guys, and have traveled all over the world. You've been to Ireland or Spain and a couple other pretty cool spots, and then all over the country as well. So it's an awesome organization to be a part of.
I'm having a hard time putting the words bagpipes and gigs in the same sentence, which you just did. So I appreciate that. Where'd you guys get your love of music and your musical talent? And before you answer that, I'm actually being told that only one of you has musical talent and the other is just a drummer. Patrick, would you clear that up for us?
Well, I would venture to say that the real musical talent from the bagpipe, it's pretty clear distinction. James makes a little bit of noise in the background. We're leading the way up front, but James would say you are the heartbeat of the band. Yeah. So
let the guys in the front have all the glory. We'll just hold it down, a solid line in the back.
And you just close it, drop mic, and you're out. So, Patrick, you actually went to Iona College, now Iona University. on a bagpipe scholarship. I'm absolutely 1000% certain that you're the only person I've ever met who received a bagpipe scholarship. When did you start playing the bagpipes, and how hard are they to learn?
Not that hard. Yeah, I started. I was a kid. I want to say it was probably like sixth grade. Fifth or sixth grade. So it takes a while. You start on a practice chanter, they call it. You kind of graduate up to the full blown pipes. Full of a lot of hot air, right? It does take some practice to like get the metrics of how you're going to fill the bag, and you got to keep that sound consistent. And it's not always a pleasant thing to listen to somebody learning how to play the bagpipes. I can say that. But my parents, they thought I was pretty cool, and when I was finally kind of graduated up to actually getting a set of pipes, it was a big deal. My dad was pretty good at like incentivizing us, so I had to learn like 10 tunes on the chanter and be able to play them, all the way through. And it's like, if you could do that, we'll get you the pipes. And once you can play those 10 tunes on the pipes, then you're going to get the uniform, and you're going to, the kilt, and you get to march in the parade. So that was always the goal. And so it took me a while to play, but once I got the hang of it, it was off to the races. A lot of fun. Iona is one of the few colleges or universities that has a pipe band. They're the Gales, right? So they're kind of Christian Brothers school, and have always had a pipe band. There's only a couple of them, but yeah, they did offer for guys who knew how to play, a scholarship. So I was lucky to be one of those guys. There's a couple guys there that were on, and they were excellent, some really excellent pipers that came into the school at a high school already knowing how to play at a very high level. So it was fun. We had a good time, but back in the day, you could take your pipes outside of a pub and just start playing and march in. You don't get ID'd, and then someone will hand you a Guinness. So I learned that from a young age too.
Hashtag winning. And being Scottish, I'm not going to ask you what's under the kilt, so we'll just move on from there. But Patrick, you also took your bagpipes to Iraq and Afghanistan. Obviously, they aren't exactly standard issue Army equipment. Why'd you take the bagpipes on those deployments, and did you get to use them much?
Yeah, I did actually. It is part of who I am now. You try to bring the pipes with you wherever you go, someplace unique. But they were started out right back in their history is the war pipes. It's a calling to like we're going forward. It's intimidating. They're pretty loud and very distinct sound. So I brought them as a way to kind of honor that tradition. I'd play them. My guys would be kind of hanging out, and I'd break them out once in a while. I'd stand on the top of our outpost in Iraq and play "God Bless America." Kind of, just had some good symbolism to me. So I brought them to both Iraq and Afghanistan, and got to play them, occasionally, which was kind of cool.
And sticking with your bagpipes, you were home in Queens from a tour of duty in Afghanistan in 12/11 when President Obama announced that Navy SEALs had killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. What did you and James do next?
That was kind of a crazy night. I was pulling into my house in Long Beach. I was living out in Long Beach at the time, and the phone rings and they say, "Hey, they're going to announce they killed Osama bin Laden." And Pat was recently home, and I was like, I didn't even go in my house. I just started driving towards home to Mom's house where Pat was, and said, "I'm going to pick you up. We got to do something." And we really didn't know what to do. And between Long Beach and Rockaway, where we were headed, my phone just kept ringing. I was picking guys up, and then we ended up getting to Pat, and we picked him up, and he threw his pipes in the car. We had an American flag with us, and we were like, "Where should we go?" We didn't know what to do. Right? It was like such a proud moment, like such a great moment for the country, and I don't know who even said it. We just said, "Let's go to the city. Let's go to Ground Zero," and so we flew in through right through the tunnel. We parked and we just started walking, and you can kind of hear the chants. And Pat struck up the bagpipes, and we had a big American flag with us with all the victims' names. And we kind of turned a corner, and there was just hundreds of people. And with Pat playing and the flag, we kind of went right into the middle of this huge crowd. And just the overwhelming sense of patriotism and camaraderie and incredible night that really, it was the essence of of America, right? Like we won, we worked hard at it, and good beat evil in that moment. So it was to be at ground zero, Pat playing the pipes, and with some of our closest friends was just incredible.
Yeah, I remember we turned that corner, had no idea. We thought we'd be the only ones down there, honestly. When we turned the corner, there was thousands and thousands of people. It seemed only right to start playing again. God Bless America, America the Beautiful, those types of tunes on the pipes. So holding an American flag behind me, I just kind of started marching in, and people started recognizing the tune and literally singing along. So I had this whole crowd singing, God Bless America while I played it on the pipes, standing right outside of Ground Zero. Definitely a very, very cool moment for us. So yeah, stands out as a great memory.
A friend of mine is a big baseball fan like I am. He's a Phillies fan. Just recently shared me a clip on that evening. So it was a Sunday night. The only thing on sports for TV was a Sunday night baseball game, and it was Mets and Phillies. And then to your point, people started getting texts to figure out what's going on. And the whole stadium, both Mets and Phillies fans, start hugging and start chanting USA. The players on the field, they have no idea what's going on. And then, I think about 2 innings later, they finally figured out that while they were getting texts, like the trainers and things were saying, hey, we got Bin Laden, Bin Laden. So, I mean, it's one of the most remarkable scenes, to your point.
Yeah. That's, again, as an American, right? It didn't matter what political affiliation. It didn't matter where you lived, anything. It only mattered that it was about America. And that's kind of what we think about when we talk about 9/11, and the reason why we're comfortable talking about it, not just, to keep our father and those guys that made a sacrifice is like their memories alive, but we think about what that meant for the country. Like on 9/12, like we said, there were people that were just standing along West Street, just outside of the site, with flags and thank you FDNY, thank you NYPD, handing out coffee, saying just basically very positive, right? And that's what we want. That's what we want our country to be like, So be like the way it was on 9/12.
Well, to that point, it was 14 years ago since we got Bin Laden. We're 24 years-ish post 9/11. We made a promise to never forget, but we are. There are over 100 million Americans that hadn't been born or were too young to remember 9/11 or what they shouldn't forget. There's a Pew Research report that came out in 2023 that said 1 in 5 Gen Zers have sympathy or empathy towards Osama bin Laden. You two saw this and lived through it firsthand. What can we do to get back to September 12th or the night it came out that we got bin Laden?
I think education is important. I do not think that it's written in the history books yet of this country, right? Which is incredible to me. I think, I pull my kids out of school for it every year, and we go to a memorial. We go to we both do. We both bring the kids to Dad's Firehouse. I think it should be something that is like a true day of remembrance, and definitely think that getting education, getting words on paper for kids to really read is something that really needs to happen soon.
Yeah, the sympathy side of it. When there's innocence involved, I think what I learned, especially, from my time overseas and stuff, is that we take special consideration for civilians. We're extremely disciplined as best we actually can about not harming civilians and just helping the general population. When you target civilians, whatever your stance might be, you target civilians, that is wrong, that is bad, and that is evil. And that has to be called out as well. And it doesn't matter what race, creed, or anything is involved. There's good and evil, and there's, I think, a pretty clear distinction in my mind as to what is good and what is bad. And I think that has to be called out as well. We can't really dance around that topic.
When you talk about us being Americans, I was speaking with somebody recently, and they said that one of their most vivid recollections on September 12th while walking around New York City was that they go through different neighborhoods, and you know as well as anybody, most neighborhoods have a certain ethnicity, and they'll have their flags hanging up there. There were no different country flags. Every neighborhood had an American flag up.
Yeah.
And to your point, we have to get back to that.
Well, we've been on 9/11. We go to the firehouse, and we'll be standing outside. You know, everyone's talking. All the guys are in uniform, and people will walk by and go, "What's going on? What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "It's 9/11," and again, they don't even know that what that means. So, I do think that at a national level, there's probably some better work we could do to quote unquote never forget.
Well, and to your point, there's only 16 states that actually teach this in their history books, and so that needs to change for starters.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I've made the statement several times that if you didn't live in the sort of the Northeast corridor of the United States, you weren't really affected. It didn't really hit you that much. You saw this terrible event, and so many people just think it's a New York City thing, or maybe some people who knew people there. They forget about the Pentagon. They forget about the Flight 93 going down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and it's a bigger thing than just the Northeast corridor. I mean, to your point, on September 12th, we were all unified as Americans. And so that has completely changed. It's completely forgotten. And it's just, talking to two gentlemen is just frustrating, upsetting for me for that.
Chris, I always equate it like, I said, if you go to Oklahoma and you ask the people of Oklahoma, when was the Oklahoma City bombing, right? They'll all tell you the date, the time, and the victim count, right? So it's true that we kind of do have short-term memories. And we do have life is so hectic, right? That it's often easy just to kind of see it in the blurb on the news and keep walking. And it's a shame. But, when you think of it like that, when you think of the people of Oklahoma and they remember, I can it's a shame, but I can see how it gets forgotten. And it's our job, like what you're doing, to make sure that we kind of keep it on the forefront.
Yeah, I summarize it as it matters to the people that matter to us.
Very well spoken. Very well said. And my wife commented, during the fires in Los Angeles earlier this year, we're watching the devastation, everyone losing their homes. I had a former colleague lose everything. She said, this is their 9/11. Mm-hmm. So, we're over here on the East Coast. We feel terrible for them, but we've got, 4 walls, a roof, and a door, and they don't. And we forget about it every day, but they're still putting their lives back together. And so it puts things in perspective. And again, you just kind of hopefully the country comes back together because we need it more than ever. James, you speak to audiences about the lessons you learned from your dad about service, resilience, and the enduring impact of family and duty. How can people connect with you if they'd like to have you speak to their group?
You can just email me at jamesmdowdell@gmail.com. And yeah, we're trying to, like Pat said before, the message is always going to be, overcoming adversity, staying the course, like Pat going to West Point, me going to follow my father's footsteps, and just kind of staying on track. And it's really great to get in front of people and talk about our father, our family, and our lives. And I think it's also, while remembering 9/11, it's keeping it on the forefront of people. And I said, I know that it's a connection when afterwards I talk to people, and they always tell me where they were on September 11th. And so hearing those stories and interacting is just, it's great.
It's therapeutic too. It is
Sure.
comforting to talk about it. And like James was saying, people that we talk to they do remember in a lot of cases. These are people that maybe didn't experience the loss or weren't directly connected to it, but after hearing a personal story, they can make a connection to it, and that helps with the education and the thought going forward. Where I did meet somebody who was affected by it, I heard them talk about it. It made an impact on me, and then all the lessons that we've learned along the way tie them into that as well.
Well, and you guys know, my listeners know, I was at Ground Zero that day, but I don't think I shared with you. To this day, so we're 24 years later, I have the pair of shoes I was wearing, the trading jacket I was wearing, the tie I was wearing, and the trade tickets in my pocket from September 10th because the markets didn't open on September 11th. And so completely understand that. More importantly, maybe, if people want to book you guys for a bagpipe and a drum gig, do we have a website or anything?
No.
All right. I'm glad you laughed at that. So what do you think that Americans should always remember about 9/11, and especially as time passes? We touched on a few things. Is there one specific thing?
Sacrifice. It's about sacrifice. Look, there were folks that just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that is tragic. There was others that went in head first, knowing what danger might lie ahead. But the ultimate thing is just it's about being, America was attacked. It was at the World Trade Center and at on those planes and at the Pentagon, but it was America that was attacked. They were trying to attack our values, who we are as a country, in their twisted way. So we try to take the positive out of that, right? What does that mean to us as Americans, and how do we teach our kids to be good Americans? And so I think at the root of it, there was sacrifices that were made for the greater good, but ultimately we try to come out of it stronger. And that's what I would want someone to take, when they think about 9/11, it's about, taking strength out of something bad that happened and turning it into good.
My wife and I have a son that's in 7th grade. He's 12 years old, and he came home a few months ago with a book about 9/11, and I've never been prouder. So completely understand that. James and Patrick Dowdell, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a real pleasure and an honor to have you guys here. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate it.
And thank you to our audience, which includes people in more than 50 countries, for joining us for another episode of Next Steps Forward. I'm Chris Meek. For more details on upcoming shows and guests, please follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Chris Meek Public Figure, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Chris Meek_USA. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time, same place, with another leader from the world of business, health, literature, public policy, politics, sports, or entertainment. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.